Good morning and welcome to today's mission status briefing. With us are Gary Horlocker, the STS-134 lead flight director, who's just coming off his Orbit 1 shift, his final shift of the mission, and Heather Hinkler, the principal investigator of the storm test, which was concluded today. Gary, would you begin, please?
Sure. Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. It's really great to be here. Absolutely outstanding day today so far. I think probably the word I'd use to sum it up is pretty much flawless. We obviously undocked today from the space station, pretty much undocked right on time. And as we talked yesterday, the pilot, Greg Johnson, was at the controls. He backed Endeavour away from the station out to about 400 feet. And then he initiated the full lap fly around. And so we did the fly around, got our standard photos of the entire outside of the space station. We also took a few photos, specific photos of the ATV vehicle as requested by our colleagues across the Atlantic Ocean. And once the fly around was complete, the crew started the storm trajectory, take care of the storm DTO for today. All those burns went perfectly as planned. The trajectory was right on the money, and everything just went really, really well. And Heather's going to give you more details about how the sensor performance went, so we can hang on to that for a few minutes. So we got all that accomplished, and so once we got outside the range of the sensors, we started shifting gears towards thinking about coming home. The crew got right into the water dumps that we always have right after we get undocked, and those were in progress as I left the control center. Then they'll be also working on getting the cabin in the right configuration and start configuring the ship as a reentry vehicle. So like I said, things so far went really, really great today. We did have one little distraction during the storm trajectory. Shortly after SEP 2, the crew got a fuel cell message on board, a fuel cell delta volt message. And so basically, the orbiter has 3 fuel cells. That's how we generate power for the entire vehicle. And each of those fuel cells has 96 cells within it, and those are broken down into 3 separate substacks. So there's 32 cells within a substack. And the fuel cell has a cell performance monitor attached to it. And with this, it's a very small black electronic box strictly to monitor the performance of the fuel cell. And it basically takes each of those substacks and looks at half of it, 16 cells at a time. So it compares the voltage across both of those halves of the stack of 16 cells each. And so ideally, you expect that voltage, delta volts between the 2 halves to be 0 in an ideal world, but obviously, it's going to be a very small number in the real world. And if that delta volt value climbs to a certain point, it's an indication that the fuel cell is degrading and you're starting to have some issues with the fuel cells. So that's basically the purpose of the cell performance monitor, the CPM box. So it exceeded that limit. It performs that test every 7.5 minutes. It exceeded that limit, tripped the message, crew got it. We were looking at the fuel cell performance in real time. We had no other indications of any problems. The fuel cell was performing great. So we just kept an eye on it. Next time it ran the self-test, it turned out nominal. And so basically it was kind of intermittent throughout the storm trajectory. I think we had seven self-test failures throughout the last few hours. And then in between each of the other self-tests were just nominal. So it's kind of an intermittent indication that we're seeing, but again, the fuel cell's performing absolutely perfectly the way it has all flight. We have no concerns about its actual performance. We think it's really just an issue with this performance monitor box. So it's very similar to a signature we saw on STS-130 last time Endeavour flew. It was actually an indication on a different substack in the same fuel cell, and after that flight, they replaced this CPM box, a performance monitoring box. So it's very interesting, but again, the fuel cell looks like it's working fine. So the team's going to be continuing to watch it and talking about it throughout the day. So I think that's really all I got to add. I'll hand it over to Heather to give you the details on how the storm activity went today.
Thanks, Gary. The storm team had a great night tonight. We were able to get VNS data throughout the entire undock, re-rendezvous and final separation trajectory. The software performed flawlessly. Drew Foystel put us into all the right modes, right on schedule. We had no anomalies, and we're real excited about getting a lot more VNS data. We've accumulated throughout Rendezvous and including today, nearly 600 gigabytes of data. So we have a lot of good data analysis days coming ahead of us once we get the boxes off the vehicle in Florida, and the team will start working together to analyze all that data. So from a ground perspective, during real time, we get to see data over the sequential still video. So we don't get all the detailed data that I showed yesterday, which had some, I guess, detailed plots of some of the performance of the VNS. So what we get to see is one snap every 30 seconds versus the, I guess, 30 times per second that the laser's actually firing. And we do calculate a range estimate based on that, and that looked really great. We compared it against TCS in close and out further against the shuttle state vector, and that matched really well. We're very happy with what we saw. It looks again like we've exceeded our 5-kilometer goal, so that was very exciting. We were lots of smiles and cheers. We had nice words from Drew at the end of the mission, and the Storm team has done phenomenally. We were throwing a curveball the other day with our docking camera data recorder. Did not come up today as we were all kind of crossing our fingers it might initialize correctly. So there was no new docking camera data to collect today, but we did get our primary objective on the Orion MPCV-like trajectory for the re-rendezvous. It was flown exactly per design, and we believe we will have met those objectives. We do have all the docking camera data collected from Rendezvous safely stored on the data recorders, so that should be no problem when we get it back. And just like to thank the wonderful Storm team from Johnson Space Center, from Langley Research Center, from Ball Aerospace, and from Lockheed Martin. It was a fantastic group of folks, a lot of talent, and a pleasure to have worked with everybody for the last few years.
Thank you, Heather. Thanks, Gary. We'll start with questions now. First here in Houston. If you'd step to the microphone once you're recognized, please remember to say your name and your affiliation. Bill?
Philip Sloss with NASASpaceflight.com. How were you able to? How far out were you able to maintain lock on the station, going out and then coming back?
So again, it's a little difficult to tell, especially on the way out. It happens to be a part of space station that has no visible reflectors on there. So data was showing that the laser was likely shooting and timing out for most of that area. But again, we are only getting one frame every 30 seconds. And once we get all the data back on the ground, we'll have the 30 hertz data. And we believe we'll see some intermittent acquisition of the space station during that time. But without any visible reflectors, when you start getting out at ranges that far, we'll have to kind of see what happened with it and how it performed. Again, one of our objectives for the VNS getting flown is what is the reflectivity of the space station like in this wavelength versus when you do and do not have reflectors visible in the field of view.
And I'll just go ahead and add to that. You know, the outbound trajectory was really designed to set up the inbound trajectory to meet their prime objective. And, you know, of course, station did reconfigure to get some power generation during that time frame as well. So wasn't optimized for the storm reflectors for that phase. So.
And then on when do you expect to get your data and your hardware back?
Yeah, so we've kind of been told by KSC, return to Florida plus about a week. We will get back in the vehicle and perform a post-flight test. We'll just fire everything up and do a return to Earth great, just like we expected to. Then we'll get the sensors and the data recorder package will get moved over to another facility at KSC, and that will start our data retrieval. If we pulled 24 hours a day, we would get everything off in 6 days. So then we'll have that 600 gigabytes of data passed on to all the analysts to go have their fun.
Additional questions, Robert?
Robert Perlman with CollectSpace.com. To follow up on that question for Heather, what's the end product? What do you have at the end of all the after all the analysis is done? Is it an animation of the approach, individual stills? What are we going to see when everything's ready?
So I think we'll see all of that. And from a usability of all of that, what will happen is the Orion MPCV program will take in all of this data and utilize the lessons learned, the actual performance we saw for space station to update any of the models of the VNS that they use on the ground with those models that they feed into the relative nav system and then into the overall guidance, navigation, and control. They'll be able to very accurately design around that for performance of the vehicle, for all their mission planning, and the data will go ahead and also prove for the docking camera perspective the situational awareness that the crew will use for flying out angular misalignments and such, just as the shuttle crew does today.
Okay, thanks. And for Gary, realizing that the CPM intermittent failure is not a huge concern at this point, if it did become more of a concern, what are your options as opposed to just ignoring it?
Yeah, so the CPM is, in simplistic terms, just telemetry on how the fuel cell's performing. So if that box were to fail completely, what we're also talking about doing is setting up the fuel cell monitoring system, FCMS, and that's basically just a application on the onboard laptop that ties into the vehicle data system, and it'll give us the next layer of insight. We can go down and look at each cell level in the fuel cell and look at each cell separately, which we can't do at the CPM level. So it'd be the next step in data gathering, if you will. But again, all the data coming from the fuel cell and that we watch in real time as it's running is again looking great.
Okay, additional questions here in Houston? Seeing none, we'll go to the phone bridge. Marcia?
Yes, hi, good morning. Gary, I have a couple questions for you. The first being, I heard you and Mark Kelly discussing potentially windy weather here at Kennedy Space Center on Wednesday morning. Could you fill us in on what the latest weather update might be?
Sure, Marcia. I know the last forecast I saw was pretty old, and of course, Florida is what it is until you're just about to either launch or land there. So, I'm not too excited about it yet. But the forecast was outside the flight rule limits for the crosswinds. I know we were looking at the data actually coming off the runways just an hour or two ago, and it was actually fairly calm. So, again, until we get a little bit closer, I'm not too excited about that forecast.
Thank you. And could you also reflect for a moment on the fact that this is Endeavor's final journey into space and that there is only one more shuttle mission left before it all ends?
Sure. It's a long time coming. It's been an incredible program. I've been focused on making sure we get this mission accomplished. Is fairly aggressive from the beginning and a pretty long mission, and we met every objective, got everything accomplished. So, right now I'm just going to take a deep breath and enjoy the fact that we've gotten through the 99% of the mission. All we got to do is get the crew and the ship home now. So, I think it will be bittersweet seeing it on the runway here, hopefully in 2 days. And then we got Atlantis rolling out that same night to the launch pad, and then one last flight for the program. So it's kind of sad to see it ending, but it's time to move on to the next chapter.
Thank you.
Bill Harwood?
Yeah, a quick one for Gary. Just based on your nav data, how far back did you guys fall off, and how far did you come up before it stalled out?
Oh, the trajectory. You're asking about trajectory distance. I believe we got right around 29,000 feet, which was what we were targeting on the outbound part of the trajectory, and then coming up in close to station after we did the TPI burn, which puts you on target for your final point just below the space station, targeting 1,000 feet below and 300 feet behind. We got to about 950 feet from the space station, and the trajectory stalled out. Crew did not have to do any braking pulses whatsoever, and then we just fell away and did SEP 3. So again, the trajectory was right on the money almost the whole way tonight. It was really, really outstanding.
And one more quick one for me, and maybe this is for Heather. What is the advantage I guess, what do you call this, a co-elliptic approach versus an R-bar or a V-bar approach? What is the advantage of that, if there is one, or is it just a different way of doing things? Thanks.
Sure. So it is a different way of doing things. And as a matter of fact, once you're past that either stable orbit rendezvous like the shuttle performs or a co-elliptic, the trajectory beyond that looks pretty similar as far as flying around to the V-bar and then approaching along the positive V-bar to the station for docking. So there's a couple of differences. One, you get on a trajectory that's a delta height below the trajectory of the space station. So you could just kind of stay in that orbit. It's a safe orbit, it's a non-collision, and you can kind of approach from below, and then you just make some burns to close that delta height. And then you could come up right below on the R-bar and then fly around to the V-bar. So I know back in the days when they were designing the shuttle trajectory, they did not have that cross feed for the reaction control system jets, and it kind of ruled out any kind of an approach like this. It just the types of burns that it would require. So with a new vehicle for the Orion, it was able to kind of open back up that trade space, and this was the trajectory they picked. It's a good fuel efficient trajectory and a good safe trajectory.
Okay, Stephen Clark.
Hi, just one more question. I'm wondering if, this is Stephen Clark with Spaceflight Now, just a quick question on cost. I'm wondering if you've had a chance to go over the cost since the question yesterday of the cost of the storm experiment. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks. We've been pretty focused. Since we had our DRU-3 failure, we were pretty much working around the clock to get new procedures up to Drew. He had to take several different actions to get things powered down. So I was not able to follow up with the project on getting those final cost numbers for you. But and as the principal investigator, I was sort of responsible for the technical success of the experiment, so I didn't have those numbers readily available. I'm sure in the days to come we'll be able to close the loop on that, and you might be able to follow up with the Orion project for a better number.
Okay, thanks.
James Dean.
Hi, thank you, James Dean with Florida Today. Gary, I know we have additional briefings to come, but just because the timing is a little awkward, wondered if you could say any more about the preliminary plan for entry, if it would be right to assume that only KSC will be active Wednesday morning, I guess, and the next day would be your landing day if need be.
Yeah, the entry flight director and the program will be discussing that, throughout the morning, this morning actually, laying out the strategy and picking the strategy. But I would suspect that the first night will probably be KSC only, and if for whatever reason we can't get landing that first day, that second day we'll have KSC and Edwards. But again, they'll be discussing that here this morning and coming up with a final strategy.
Right, appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, I believe that's it for the phone bridge. Do we have additional questions here in Houston? Seeing none, we'll wrap up the briefing. You can follow the progress of the STS-134 mission of Endeavour and activities on the International Space Station at www.nasa.gov. Thank you for coming.